We've all been there, sitting quietly, feeling really uncomfortable while our co-workers bitch about another colleague. We may want to speak up, stop the conversation, or tell them they're wrong, but we feel helpless and worried about saying the wrong thing. It's tempting to think that it doesn't really matter, but this sort of behaviour really undermines trust in an organisation and spreads negativity and bad feeling, and it can completely undermine the psychological safety we need to work well as a team. In this episode, I'm joined again by Dr. Ed Pooley, who's a GP and specialist in communication and time management, on a brand new regular slot where we answer all your questions about tricky situations at work. So if you've got any questions about how to deal with difficult colleagues, communicate with defensive co-workers, or raise issues with unreasonable bosses or thoughtless partners, then please do send them in. Today, we're thinking about what to do when you hear colleagues backbiting, bitching, or making other inappropriate comments about other people. We think about why it's important to consider the question behind the question and how you can raise concerns without raising heckles. So join us to find out the consequences of ignoring what's going on. Join us to find out how to challenge in a supportive way, and join us to find a simple framework for speaking up. Welcome to You Are Not a Frog, the podcast for doctors and other busy professionals who want to beat burnout and work happier. I'm Dr. Rachel Morris. I'm a GP now working as a coach, speaker and specialist in teaching resilience. Even before the coronavirus crisis, we were facing unprecedented levels of burnout. We have been described as frogs in a pan of slowly boiling water. We hardly noticed the extra long days becoming the norm and have got used to feeling stressed and exhausted. Let's face it, frogs generally only have two options: stay in the pan and be boiled alive, or jump out of the pan and leave. But you are not a frog, and that's where this podcast comes in. It is possible to craft your work and life so that you can thrive even in difficult circumstances. And if you're happier at work, you'll simply do a better job. In this podcast, I'll be inviting you inside the minds of friends, colleagues and experts, all who have an interesting take on this, so that together we can take back control and love what we do again. I wanted to let you know that we're now taking bookings for our Shapes Toolkit programs for late 2021 and 2022. Now, these programs help doctors, professionals in health and social care and other high-stress jobs take control of their workload, feel better and beat stress and burnout. We've also got some brand new sessions on how to influence and negotiate even if you're not the boss, dealing with conflict, and how to support your team through the new ways of working without burning out yourself. Find out more by emailing me or get in contact through our website. Now on with the episode. So it's brilliant to have with me on the podcast today, Dr. Ed Pooley. Ed, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really great to have you here. Now, we are going to be dealing with some listeners' questions today. In fact, these questions that we're going to start off with are questions that have come through your Facebook group, aren't they, Ed? What's the Facebook group that you run?
So I run a Facebook group for health professionals called Difficult Conversations, which is about how we use techniques from psychology, business, psychotherapy, and communication skills training to have better relationships with patients and colleagues and communicate more effectively.
Fantastic. And I know that's a very active group and you get lots and lots of questions. So we thought, actually, wouldn't it be good to be able to sort of have some discussions about
Absolutely.
these, get the wisdom that you're sharing with people out to people as a whole. And what we'd like to do is start recording these regularly. So we would love to hear from any listeners who either have questions that they would like us to discuss on the podcast, or if you have any feedback or any suggestions or any things that you've done in your own professional life that have been helpful, we'd love to hear about that. So do email us at hello@youarenotafrog.com, and we'd just love to hear your questions or your comments. So Ed, let's kick off with our first question here. So what do we do if we are in a workplace, be it a surgery or somewhere else, where we hear a lot of backbiting amongst the staff about either somebody else or another staff group, and we're listening to it And I've certainly been in this situation myself, and we're starting to feel more and more uncomfortable, but we're not saying anything. We're not challenging, but then we get really worried that by our silence, we could be seen to be colluding. I mean, have you been in that situation?
Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, it's a really good question, isn't it? It's something that we all face and we've all probably had some experience of, where you're in that situation and there's that conversation going on either directly towards you, where someone is trying to talk about a colleague and almost canvass your opinion, or when you're overhearing perhaps two other colleagues talk about someone else and you're a bystander. So yes, I've been in that situation. I think that over the last few years, my way of managing that situation has changed, because it's often one of those things that's very difficult to challenge if you don't have a strategy for it and if you don't understand the drivers towards it. But it is something that you kind of have to have a strategy to dealing with, because many times if you're getting pulled into a conversation where an unseen party is being discussed, an unseen person is being discussed, there is the very real risk that you could be accused of colluding with someone who is bullying, and that sort of, I mean, we do those sort of training videos, don't we, at the start of our placements and our jobs, where this is a common example in terms of what do you do when you overhear someone talking about a third person that isn't there. So yes, it's a very common situation. I think for me, part of me wants to understand why it's happening. Sometimes it's a reflection of poorly dealt with way of managing a genuine grievance. So sometimes the issue that is being raised is actually a problem, but it's being raised in the wrong way. And sometimes it's being used as almost a way of connecting with another staff member, but again, it's in a way that's not very authentic. And the typical example is it's almost a reflection of that school playground kind of connection. Oh, that Mr. Smith was horrible, wasn't he? That teacher was awful. I didn't like the way they did that. And it's almost a very childlike way of connecting with others. And I think the third time is when it really is a genuine issue that can lead to some serious consequences. And I suppose the examples I can think of there are where there is misogyny involved, where there's racism involved, where there is outright bullying involved, where comments are being made that are about the characteristics of a person rather than about genuine grievances that could be dealt with in a different way. So those are the three things I would say that I would kind of divide it into. I mean, I don't know whether you would divide it into more or what your take would be on those three categories.
I think those three categories are really, really helpful. I think in real life, it's probably very difficult to determine which is which, because maybe there is a genuine problem, which is coming out in the wrong way, but there is a problem. So I think things are rarely really, really black and white, are they? I think that one of the biggest things is actually the connecting with others as well. That
Mm.
actually we do connect, that's why we love watching soap operas, isn't it? And why we've all been glued to Line of Duty, because we just love seeing
Yeah.
things go wrong and be able to talk about the various different characters. So it's sort of a bit of human nature to want to discuss things. But how do we know the difference between when it is sort of genuinely letting off steam about something and when you should just sort of let it run and the steam needs to be let off, and when it has tipped over into something that is really unhelpful that we should be challenging?
I think some of that is gut feel and experience. I think you know when something feels awkward or unprofessional or inappropriate. I think there's a difference between saying, "Oh, that the cleaner hasn't picked up that again. Oh, they're not very good, are they?" And someone saying that cleaner's not very good. All people of that race are like that. Those kind of, where it's not about what someone is doing, but about who they are. And that's that difference between commentary and identity kind of level criticism, where there's an issue. Um, I think one of the big difficulties, actually, one of the reasons this question has come up, is that it is really difficult to know when to step in, because sometimes things are phrased in such a way that if you step in, someone who is saying it could respond, oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. And actually, that doesn't lead to a positive outcome either, because then the behavior usually persists. I think it's probably better to err on the side of caution and actually say something. And you don't have to jump in all guns blazing. You could say, you know, listen, it sounds like you're a bit frustrated with what happened here, but I'm not sure it's appropriate to be discussing that person. You know, if you've got a problem with that person, perhaps go and have a word with them, and that way we can ensure that this doesn't happen again, rather than talking about it when they're not here, because I don't think that's gonna resolve the situation. That would be my approach if that line into kind of misogyny, racism, or kind of criticism of protected characteristics started to be involved. If those things start to be involved, I would generally jump in a much firmer way and say, look, that's not appropriate. This isn't about whether a person is a man or a woman. It's not about their ethnicity. It's not about their sexuality. This is not an appropriate thing to be doing. If you have a concern about what someone is doing, let's focus on that. But it's not about the characteristic that you mentioned.
When we did the series on podcasts about racism, and it was one about speaking up, they were suggesting that actually a really non-confrontational way of doing it was just say, oh, what do you mean by that? So actually get them to, if they're making little snidey comments that could be taken either way, just challenging, saying, what did you mean by that? That's a sort of little bit of a warning red flag, saying, I've noticed that that's not quite right. And then they get the opportunity to backtrack and go, oh, actually, I didn't mean that. That came out badly. No, I'm not trying to say that. And then they've caught themselves and they've stopped themselves. And I quite like that, because I guess what you're trying to avoid is, and I think this is very difficult to do, is making that person feel shame.
Then nothing actually changes, which is what we're looking for here. We're looking for a positive outcome or a positive improvement in whatever the situation is. So when I'm talking to patients, for example, I have a kind of a 4-step process, and I suppose you can translate that directly to working with staff. So the first one, I would say, well, I'm not sure the relevance of that comment. Can you explain? The second, I feel uncomfortable with that word or phrase or statement. Let's focus on the issue in hand. Then you can escalate it further to, I don't accept the use of that term. Let's move on to the issue regarding. And then for that type of statement or phrase or comment is not acceptable here, regardless of your reasons, we have a zero tolerance policy about that kind of language. So what you're doing is it gives you a way in, because people often, it's easier for many people to not act unless they've had the training on how to act and how to confront a situation that doesn't feel okay. And I think having a stepwise approach works very well. It tends to allow you to enter perhaps a less confrontational level if that's needed, so that you're not triggering that shame and defensiveness in someone else, so that then it's not a problem that is pushed away, or it's brought out into the open and dealt with. Because sometimes people will use expressions because either they think they're the correct expression or they don't know, and I think giving them a chance to explain is sometimes helpful. I don't think it's helpful all the time, but I think it's sometimes helpful as an initial statement.
And I love that. I love that stepping it up. So you've got your sort of warning phrase, and then it goes up and up and up and up. What if it's not about a protected characteristic? So you can't be, so that isn't a problem. But it is just general bitching about somebody, just and it's low grade bitching, oh, well, she didn't come to work again today, or they didn't do this, and oh, they always do this, and of course they are, and it's all implied, not actually said. We've all been there, and you'll sat there, you're feeling more and more uncomfortable, and you think, I need to say something, I just don't know what to say. Would you take that same approach?
I might start a little softer and say, it sounds like you've really noticed that this is an issue. How long has that been going on for? What's led? Why might that be? What might have caused that person to behave that way? So what you're doing is you're trying to encourage the person to think how the other may be feeling and how that person may have come to that decision. And sometimes there is no rational reason as to why someone else is behaving in a certain way that you can discern. But I think encouraging that exercise in others helps, because it allows you to avoid almost tribalism or in-group, out-group phenomena where, everyone's like, oh, we're team A and the others, they're team B, and we can just, backbite about them and make comments about them. And actually what you're doing is, if you're in an organization, it makes a lot more sense for everyone in your organization to be heard. So by asking someone and engaging with them and saying, why do you think that's happening? How can we make this feel better? How might you feel if someone was talking about you in this way? Because we all know that we're not perfect. Encourages your organization to function better. And if your organization functions better, the employees will be happier. Because if there's a lot of backbiting going on, to me, it's almost a symptom of discontent, because backbiting doesn't happen in organizations where everyone is happy and fulfilled and listened to and communication is authentic, because you're almost given permission to go up to someone and say, look, I'm a bit frustrated with that email that you sent. I don't like it. I feel it was kind of aimed at me. Am I reading the situation wrong, or have I got it right? And if that kind of conversation is permitted, your organization will function better and it will grow. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with people who are unhappy, who, to some extent, and it kind of goes back to that auto-suggestion theories of kind of like the 1920s and 30s, where constantly saying, oh, I'm in an organization that doesn't listen to me, and oh, that person's useless and rubbish, tends to make you almost become, it activates those negative thinking circuits in the brain and reinforces them rather than reinforcing the positive ones. And so I think approaching it from a, why is this happening? How can we reduce it? What's really going on here? And is this a symptom of a larger problem? Is a really helpful way of course correcting.
Mm. And so what you're saying is you sort of look for the question behind the question. I'm hearing a lot about this, and almost every podcast people I interview, it's all about actually what's behind that. What's actually going behind what they're saying? Why is this an issue for them? And I was just about to ask, is it good just to the minor stuff, just to ignore it and sweep it under the carpet? But then as I was thinking that, and you said this whole thing about auto-suggestion, I think that's a really important thing to remember, that if you've sat and you've listened to half an hour of someone bitching about somebody else, even if you don't agree and you're trying not to take it on board, then the next time you see that person, your brain's almost been programmed to notice the negative and to notice the bad stuff. So actually it is quite dangerous.
No one wants to work in an organization where everyone is miserable and talking about other colleagues, because if you witness that behavior, if you're feeling low that day or you've made a mistake, the first thing that you may assume is, now they're going to be talking about me because I've seen them do it about other people. On the flip side, people don't want to work in an organization where everything you say is picked up and acted on and, almost therapized into a, why do you feel that way? How does that? And so I think some of the minor stuff where people might say things as a one-off, or they might just make a comment, I think sometimes you can just let it go if it's okay to do that. Again, I would put that caveat in about protected characteristics. So I think, if someone says something once and it's an off-the-cuff remark, I might just let it go, but I might approach it in terms of, how you doing? Are you all right? How's your day going? Just to kind of almost, so what I'm not doing is I'm not policing what they're saying. I'm more concerned by what's going on for them, because in my opinion, everything that you think and say and commit out there into the world is being driven by a thought process. And it just interests me from a people perspective. How did you reach that thought? Are you okay? Or is this a symptom of actually something much, much bigger? Because we know that, one of the signs of burnout is that people start, projecting this sort of discontent of their current role out into the open. And it's almost like the first few signs that there may be something going on. So if you're in a position where you are seeing an employee do that, a colleague do that, then just check in on them and see if they're okay. And I think that's just about being a kind human. It's not about being a boss or an employee. It's just about being a human to me.
Yeah. That's interesting you made that point. I was once working somewhere and that we had this assistant, let's call her Sarah. Sarah, how are you doing today? And she went, oh, well, it's dreadful, she said, Rachel, but I guess you can't polish a turd, can you? I thought, okay, you're not happy here, are you? Yeah, she left in a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting how different people's perspectives can be, but they can just be those people. And this person was someone like that. Nothing was ever right.
No.
She just constantly bitched about other people. Nobody could do anything, even though it was a really lovely place to work. And what do you do about that sort of person? Do you just sort of change the subject whenever they start talking? Do you try and respond with humor? Do you just ignore them?
I suppose I would look at it a slightly different way, and I would say, what's going to be the outcome if that type of communication and interaction keeps going? If there is going to be no negative outcome to that, if that's just the type of person they are, and their interaction with others is, where they're saying these kind of things isn't really going to have an impact, then it's not my job to change people. My job in an organization, or say an employee or a colleague, is to try and make that organization work as well as it can do. And so if it's not having a direct impact, I think I would let it. If it is having a direct impact, then I would take that first step, and I'd say, look, is everything okay? Is there something going on here? And then almost play it by ear, really. I suppose that the subtext of your question is that there are always going to be people who approach the world through a negative lens, and that's how they interact with people, and that's how they see the world. Is it our job to try and change everyone to be someone who always sees the glass half full? No, but it is sometimes our job to mediate between those two different viewpoints of the world if we're faced with a situation that is harming the environment in which we work.
Yeah. I guess with this particular person, I'm thinking, well, she was pretty harmless, but actually, it wasn't harmless because we stopped asking her to do things because of the reaction that we'd
Yeah,
get,
yeah.
and then the work got dumped on the person who was really lovely and friendly, and would always say yes. So maybe it was a strategy for her to sort of keep the work at
But,
bay.
but people do that. That is a recognized strategy that people who want to either directly avoid work or end up avoiding work will employ. I think we talked about this in the time management episode, where people will avoid asking people to do things where they are going to be met with negativity, or where there's going to be anger, or whether there's going to be passive aggression, because those feelings don't make us feel good. So we will avoid those. And the consequence of that is that people who aren't responding in that way will tend to disproportionately end up doing a bigger volume of work. Now, it could be that the person who is being aggressive or angry or being perceived that way when asked to do something, maybe they're better off having their interaction regulated in a way that they prefer, and actually you create more time for the person who is going to be asked to do stuff, so that there is that balancing out of responsibility. The big problem seems to come when the nice person almost gets used up because they're not given time to do things, or time to reset, because actually they're not responding negatively or confrontationally to requests for things. The request could be inappropriate, but that's kind of a separate discussion, really, I think.
That's why it's so important that if we're running organizations or managing or leading, that we get this right in terms of calling out the behavior that is unhelpful. Because we have another question here, which is, we've already talked about a little bit, but if you have got colleagues of staff who are seeing the glass half empty all the time, how do we encourage them to be more positive and to actually have some vision?
That's an interesting one, philosophically, in terms of, again, should we be making everyone see the world the way that we do? And I suppose really the answer is a person able to do what they need to do with the viewpoint that they have? Or actually, does their viewpoint limit what they can do? And I think that, those sort of 1980s kind of ideas of mission statements for companies that started to creep in was a way of trying to address this problem, so that everyone had the same goal and the same drive. The problem is that everyone doesn't have the same goal and the same drive. People are individual. They have their own ideas as to what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and why they do certain things. So I think it's not really about people seeing the glass full, but it's about engaging that person to do what they need to do, because of something that's important to them. So let's say you've got an employee who sees the glass half full, doesn't know why they're doing something. Find a way to either explain why they're doing something or what it might mean for them or the larger system, because they may not know and that's why they feel frustrated, or they may actually have a better way of doing it and they're seeing the glass as half full because they're almost being micromanaged into a way of doing something that doesn't fit. So I think, again, it's about delving a little bit deeper as to why someone feels the way they do, and is it something that needs to change? If so, well, let's move that in. Let's give a person a bit more control to try to find that glass full aspect of things. It's a bit like the Mary Poppins thing, isn't it? It's the find the fun in the task. And I know that sounds a little bit trite, but it's kind of, well, why are you doing something? How can we engage you positively? Because I know if we engage you positively, you're more likely to enjoy work, you're more likely to get the task done on time, you're more likely to have a sense of achievement if the task is done, and you're more likely to be loyal to the organization. So how do we, trigger those feelings in you? The way we trigger those feelings in you is to find out why doing something is important and relating that to your own personal circumstances.
What makes you tick? I mean, I think there's lots of different reasons why people might be really negative and glass half empty. And I think you've already mentioned one, and that's somebody who's burning out and is really stressed. And I certainly know from my own experience, the more stressed I get, the more negative I get. And especially on Sunday evenings, it tends to be, it's like my husband refuses to have deep, meaningful discussions with me on a Sunday evening. He just sticks me in front of a comedy. That's generally the best thing to do. So I have a friend, right? And he's a Myers-Briggs INTP. And I have learned over the years that whenever I share an idea with him, he's programmed to look for the negative and look for the things that might go wrong and the problems. And so often I've shared something with him, he's been quite negative about it. And then the next week he says, so what about that thing you told me about? I'm like, well, you said it was a load of rubbish. He said, no, I didn't. It's just the way he initially responds. And actually having somebody like that can be incredibly helpful in an organisation, because they spot the problems, they spot the issues, they call it out. What you've got to realise is they just need a little bit of time, and then they'll start to see the positives. So sometimes it is just the way that their brain ticks, and actually to use that, it's actually really, really helpful. Okay, that person's being negative. Rather than writing them off as they're just a negative person, it's actually what value do they bring to this decision that we're making. That's really, really important. There's something about personality. I think what you said about being the wrong fit for the job as well, I think, I know that when I was in roles that didn't suit me, that weren't playing to my strength, it made me incredibly negative, and that goes in with the stress and the burnout or whatever. So often if you just find out what it is, like, again, the question behind the question, what is it that's making you feel like that? And if we can craft your job role to actually get you doing more of the things that bring you joy and that you really are very good at, then maybe some of that negativity will be stopping. But I was talking to a GP the other day, and one of his partners was incredibly negative, and this guy I was speaking to was the managing partner, and he just basically stopped interacting or running any management decisions past the other partner because of the barrage of negativity that they got, and the relationship had become so dysfunctional. And I thought, isn't that a shame that it hasn't been addressed by then? So it's one thing being able to address it on an employer basis, but what happens when it's a colleague, or even maybe your boss, or if you're a portfolio doctor or you've got a salaried role and you're talking to the boss or your manager or a partner? Is there anything you can do?
Well, there are two things that spring to mind, actually. And one of the things that kind of lit up in my brain when you mentioned about the initial critical response is that there's a really well-known book in kind of management and arenas called Six Thinking Hats by Edward Bono. And, that person's a very typical black hat thinker where he's thinking of the critical issues. And one of the exercises in that book is to consider viewing things from how do we make this work? What are the problems in it? What are the challenges? How do we overcome things? How do we be creative? All of these, you're almost forced to take a different perceptual position to understand it. And what it does is it allows people to view things from an alternative perspective. So that if you're not a naturally critical person, you recognize that someone may have critical thoughts about an idea that you have, but actually that doesn't mean they think the idea is rubbish. They're just programmed to find the flaws. And actually, what they're doing is they're telling you the ways that you can make your product or thing better. They're actually helping you before you do it rather than get the feedback afterwards to find it hasn't worked. But it does require a little bit of sitting with some discomfort to take that on board. I mean, I'm a little bit like a Labrador that wants to go and run out and play in traffic. I'm a bit like, oh, what about this? What about that? What about that? My partner's always kind of, just she's like, can you just kind of focus on one thing? Can you just get that done? And I need someone who does that because I need that little bit of direction to say, actually, this is what you're focusing on now. Let's get this done. Let's just separate out the distraction a little bit. And I think having different viewpoints works really well.
So it's I guess it's recognizing different people's strengths and then where they're coming from. But we're still back to the point that, sometimes there just are people that are bitching, that are negative, and or even maybe racist or bullying or something, and you're sat there feeling really, really uncomfortable. And to not say anything, that really conflicts with your values because it feels like you're colluding. At the beginning, you said it's really important to have a strategy for that. What can people do to get themselves a strategy for what they're going to do next time that happens?
So I think what I would do is have a series of phrases that you can go to that you have almost dry run to see how they feel, to see what they feel like in your words. Because if they sound like someone else's words, they have less impact. Have a sequence of things that you can say. I think the first thing to do is if someone is saying something that triggers that sense of discomfort in you, is to say something, say anything, cough, make your presence known. Often that's enough just to tell someone, actually, this isn't something we should be talking about. If you need to speak up, ask someone to clarify what they mean. Just say, what do you mean by that? And then you can gradually increase almost the force behind your words all the way up to, look, that's not okay. And you can say, I feel that's inappropriate. So one of the techniques in assertiveness training is to use I feel statements. So I feel uncomfortable hearing you say that. I feel uncomfortable talking about someone when they're not here. I feel that actually what you're doing is you're generalizing a little bit. I don't think it's about this aspect of a person. It may be that actually you're feeling a bit frustrated because something else is going on. So that's one approach. The other approach is to look at it from the perspective of why the person is saying it, and just saying something like, "You're all right, everything okay," is sometimes enough to interrupt that backbiting comment and to turn the attention onto what might be going on for them. And that for some people can, if you're a fairly passive type of person, and if you're at risk of saying nothing, sometimes asking how a person is doing is one way of interrupting that process and restoring a sense of feeling okay.
I love that because it strikes me, when we teach coaching, we often teach the support challenge model. That's in any conversation. If you want someone to move forward, then it's not enough just to be really, really supportive and not challenging, because that's just really cozy. If you're really challenging without being supportive, well, that's really confrontational. And that's where you're going to get the defensiveness, particularly if you add in the judgment. So you're being racist. I mean, that would be that, immediately you're going to get a completely defensive reaction from someone, aren't you? When people feel shame, they become like a saber-toothed tiger, don't they? They just go on the attack if they're feeling shame themselves. So that's something you really need to try and avoid. And it's like what you said earlier, using that non-judgmental language, so just describing what's happening rather than you're being this, you're being that. It's just, I noticed that we're talking about somebody else and they're not here. Just that I noticed. So using the non-judgmental stuff, but being really supportive while you do that. So I can see, you must be having a really busy day. Are you okay? What can we do to help? And, maybe we should park this conversation and bring it up with so-and-so and just ask them what was going on. But then I guess we're into the whole realm of, is it your place to even challenge? What would you say to someone who would just say, actually, it's not my place? It's not my place to challenge them.
I think it is. I think that part of diversity training, particularly in organisations such as the NHS, would say actually it is your place to speak out if you hear someone saying something that is negative about a protected characteristic, or even just mean or horrible. Because you could get. Let's take the scenario where someone says something deeply inappropriate about someone else's ethnicity, and that person makes a complaint to their employer, and the employer calls in the person who said whatever was said, and that person says, "Well, Ed was there. He thought the same thing." And sometimes that can even be projected onto he said the same thing, even if I didn't say anything at all. And then I'm in a disciplinary for something that I didn't do, just by virtue of almost being. And I think that's a big problem. So I think even if you're not doing it from a moral standpoint, think about it in terms of a legal standpoint, because there is a very real risk that by not speaking up, you're really harming the person who's being criticized here, and you're going to find yourself in hot water. And what I would say is that it is hard to speak up about things, but the thing that makes it easier is practice, because if you do it, someone else will do it. And if someone else does it, another person will do it. And then it becomes part of the culture. This isn't about telling people how to think or how to feel. This is about encouraging people that there are ways of saying things that are helpful, and there are ways of saying things that are unhelpful.
Yeah. And it strikes me that if you can encourage people to say things to someone else's, to their face, they're going to say things in a much better way anyway, because you automatically do. If I was to talk about you behind your back, Ed, which I would never do, but I'd be far ruder about you behind your back.
Absolutely.
And one of the big problems in organisations, and particularly primary care, I have found, is the dysfunctions of a team. Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. Yeah. The one of which is fear of conflict, which leads to artificial harmony. So when you're all together in your team, you don't conflict, you don't say what's bothering you. No. And then when you're outside with the other people, you're slagging everyone off left, right, and centre. So if you can actually up the conflict you have as a team in a good way, so actually, Ed, I'm finding the way that you're doing that, I'm just finding that a bit tricky. Is there a way that we can, work this out? And then you've talked about it, you've conflicted, you've probably come to a good understanding. You don't need to go and bitch about that person behind their backs. And then you get the accountability, you get results, and you can generally track poorly performing organisations down through those 5 dysfunctions and end up with, lack of conflict, which actually the basis of that is lack of trust and psychological safety, which is another entire topic. But I think psychological safety underlies the whole of this, because it is not a psychologically safe organisation if people are bitching about other people and getting away with it.
Yeah.
Just like you said, you'll just be thinking, oh, crumbs, if they're talking about this and I'm here, what do they say about me behind my back?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So I think we're just about out of time, Ed. There's some really useful, helpful tips there. If someone's really struggling with this, is there any sort of good resources you'd point them towards if they want to sort of get a bit better at doing this, about challenging in a supportive way, in a way that's going to be really helpful?
There are some resources that I put on my Facebook group, so people can have a look at that, and I'll send you the link for that. And I've done some particularly on things like saying no and team dysfunctions and approaching racism and other the comments about protected characteristics. There are quite a few sort of books coming out now about, looking at things from other people's perspectives and how you might go about sort of being an ally to other people and standing up for them and showing solidarity with that person.
Yeah. And we've got some podcasts actually that I think will help. There's the sort of Combating Racism series, particularly the one about how to be more anti-racist. Adam Harrison did one with us about bullying in the workplace.
Yes, he's excellent with that sort of stuff, isn't he?
Yeah, fantastic. Also, that's that Edward de Bono book about, is it called The 6 Thinking Hats that you mentioned? Yes. There's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And I would also suggest that people listen to, there's a Rangan Chatterjee podcast, I think it's called Live Well, Feel Better. And there was I was telling Ed about this earlier, actually. There's a really good one. I think it's called How to Develop Authentic Relationships, or Deepen Your Relationships, by a couple of people who wrote a book called Connect. And that is all about how to have conversations with people, raising difficult issues without triggering them, without making them feel really defensive. And I found that really helpful. So that might be helpful for people as well. There's another book called Radical Candor as well, which I think people have found very helpful. So there's just a few things. But I think, if you had sort of one tip to someone to actually just get started with this, what would it be, Ed?
It would be try. All of the things that we do, and when we communicate, the first thing we have to do is try to communicate first, and then we fashion it into the best way that we can say something. But the first thing you have to do is say something.
Yeah, try it, even if it's just a cough or "Are you all right?"
Yeah,
that you've raised something. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ed. So we're going to get Ed back in another couple of weeks. So if you have any questions about any sort of communication or difficult conversation that you'd like us to talk about, or any feedback, then do drop us a line. We'll put the links in the show notes. So thank you, Ed, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe to my You Are Not a Frog email list and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have enjoyed it, then please leave me a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. So keep well, everyone. You're doing a great job. You got this.